Mark Reynolds woke up on a Tuesday morning in his small rented house in Pattaya, Thailand, expecting to find his wife of 3 weeks lying next to him, but instead he found empty closets, bare countertops, and a text message on his phone that read simply, "Sorry." And when he opened his banking app with trembling hands, he discovered that the joint account containing $260,000, his entire life, savings, and pension fund, now showed a balance of exactly $12, while the woman he had married, the woman who called him husband and promised to never leave, had vanished into the chaos of Pattaya with everything he owned. Mark Reynolds was 61 years old, a former construction foreman from San Diego, California, a man who had spent 40 years working in the sun, building houses and commercial buildings across Southern California, saving every dollar he could, living modestly, planning for a retirement that would finally give him the peace and comfort he had earned through decades of hard labor. He had sold his small house in Chula Vista for $210,000, cashed in his pension for another $50,000, and moved to Thailand with the dream of living out his final years in warmth, surrounded by kindness, with a woman who would appreciate him for who he was, rather than judging him for what he was not. He thought he had found that woman in Suaman Fancharon, a 29-year-old bar girl who worked at a small beer bar on Soi 6, one of the most notorious streets in Pattaya. She had told Mark to call her Pooky, and within 2 weeks of meeting her, she was calling him husband, cooking for him, sleeping in his bed, and making him feel like the luckiest man in Thailand. Within 6 weeks, they were married in a small ceremony at a local AMFR office, and Mark had opened a joint bank account, transferring all of his savings into it because Pooky said it would be easier to manage their money together, that it showed trust, that it was what Thai couples did. Mark had ignored every warning. His friends from the expat community told him never to marry a bar girl, that these women were professionals at separating lonely men from their money. His daughter back in California begged him not to rush into anything, to take his time, to protect himself. But Mark was tired of being careful. He was tired of being alone. He was tired of feeling like his life was something to be managed and protected rather than lived and enjoyed. So he ignored the warnings, signed the marriage papers, transferred the money, and believed with every fiber of his being that Pooky loved him. And now he was sitting on the floor of an empty house, staring at his phone screen, trying to understand how everything had gone so catastrophically wrong in the span of 72 hours. This is the story of how Mark Reynolds, a hardworking American who had done everything right, who had saved and planned and dreamed of a simple retirement, lost everything to a woman who saw him not as a husband but as an opportunity, a carefully calculated transaction that left him broke, homeless, and stranded in a foreign country with no way home. Mark Reynolds had not always been a lonely man. He had been married twice before, first to his high school girlfriend, a marriage that lasted 7 years and ended when she left him for someone else, and then to a woman he met in his 30s, a marriage that lasted 12 years and ended in a bitter divorce that cost him half of everything he owned. After the second divorce, Mark decided he was done with relationships. He focused on work, on saving money, on building a stable life for himself. He bought a small 2-bedroom house in Chula Vista, worked long hours as a construction foreman, and lived simply. He was good at his job. He knew how to read blueprints, manage crews, solve problems on the fly. He worked on residential developments, commercial buildings, renovations, additions. He spent his days in the sun, his hands rough and calloused, his skin weathered, his body strong despite the years. He made decent money, around $70,000 a year, and he saved as much as he could. He did not go on vacations. He did not buy expensive things. He lived in his modest house, drove a used truck, and put money away for the day when he could finally stop working. But he was lonely, desperately lonely. He would come home to an empty house, heat up a frozen meal, watch television, and go to bed. On weekends, he would work on small projects around the house, mow the lawn, fix things that did not really need fixing, just to have something to do. He had a few friends from work, but they all had wives and families, and Mark felt like an outsider when he spent time with them. He was the third wheel, the single guy, the one everyone felt a little sorry for. When he turned 60, Mark started thinking seriously about retirement. He had been working since he was 18, and he was exhausted. His knees hurt, his back hurt. He was tired of waking up at 5 in the morning, tired of dealing with difficult contractors and unrealistic deadlines, tired of the California heat and the California traffic and the California cost of living. He wanted something different. He wanted peace. He started researching places to retire abroad. He had heard about Americans living in Mexico, in Costa Rica, in the Philippines, but Thailand kept coming up in his searches. The cost of living was incredibly low. The weather was warm year-round. There was a large expat community, and there were women, beautiful, kind women who appreciated older Western men in a way that American women did not. Mark had always been attracted to Asian women. He liked the way they looked, the way they dressed, the way they seemed more feminine and traditional than the women he had known in California. He had dated a few Asian American women over the years, but those relationships had never worked out. But in Thailand, he read, things were different. Western men were valued. Western men were respected. Western men could find love and companionship without the judgment and complications that came with dating in America. In early 2023, Mark decided to take the leap. He was 60 years old, and he had saved around $200,000. He put his house on the market and sold it within 3 weeks for $210,000. He cashed in his pension, a lump sum of $50,000. He quit his job, said goodbye to his few friends, and booked a one-way ticket to Bangkok. His daughter, Emily, who lived in Los Angeles with her husband and 2 kids, was not supportive. She said he was making a mistake, that he barely knew anything about Thailand, that he should at least rent an apartment there first before selling everything. But Mark had made up his mind. He told her he was old enough to make his own decisions, that he had earned the right to live his life however he wanted. Emily stopped arguing, but Mark could hear the worry in her voice. Mark arrived in Bangkok in March of 2023. He spent 2 nights in a cheap hotel near Khao San Road, overwhelmed by the noise and the heat and the sheer chaos of the city. Then he took a bus to Pattaya, a beach city about 2 hours south of Bangkok that was famous or infamous for its nightlife, its bars, and its abundance of women willing to spend time with Western men for a price. Mark checked into a small hotel on 2nd Road and spent his first few days walking around the city, trying to get his bearings. Pattaya was unlike anything he had ever seen. The streets were crowded with motorbikes, tuk-tuks, and cars honking constantly. The sidewalks were filled with street vendors, selling everything from grilled meat to counterfeit watches. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, there were bars. Open-air bars with girls in bikinis dancing on poles, beer bars with clusters of women sitting on stools, calling out to passing men, go-go bars with neon signs, advertising shows and drinks and companionship. Mark had heard about Pattaya's reputation, but experiencing it in person was something else entirely. At first, he felt uncomfortable, almost ashamed to be there. He had never been the kind of man who paid for female attention, but the longer he stayed, the more he realized that the boundaries between transactional and genuine were blurred here. The women were friendly, warm, and seemingly interested in more than just a quick exchange of money. They asked about his life, his family, his dreams. They made him feel seen in a way he had not felt in years. On his 4th night in Pattaya, Mark walked down a narrow street called Soi 6. It was lined with small beer bars, each one with a handful of girls sitting on stools, drinking, chatting, and waving at men who passed by. Mark stopped at one of the bars and sat down. A young woman approached him immediately, smiling brightly, and asked in clear English what he would like to drink. Her name tag read Pooky. She was petite, maybe 5 feet 2 inches tall, with long black hair pulled into a ponytail, bright eyes, and a wide, genuine smile. She wore denim shorts and a tight pink tank top, and she moved with an easy confidence that Mark found immediately attractive. She brought him a beer, popped the cap, and set it down in front of him. "First time Pattaya?" she asked, leaning against the bar. "Yeah," Mark said. "Just got here a few days ago." "You like?" "It is. Different. Not what I expected." Pooky laughed. "Pattaya crazy. But good crazy. Where you from?" "California. San Diego." "Oh, America. You rich man." She laughed again, and Mark smiled despite himself. "Not rich, just retired." "Retired? You not look old." Mark knew it was flattery, but he did not care. It felt good to hear. They talked for a while about California, about Thailand, about why Mark had decided to move here. Pooky listened intently, asking questions, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm lightly when she made a point. She told him she was from Udon Thani, a province in northeastern Thailand, and that she had been working in Pattaya for 5 years. She said she was saving money to help her mother, who still lived in the village. Mark stayed at the bar for 3 hours, buying drinks for himself and for Pooky. When he finally stood to leave, Pooky touched his hand and said, "You come back tomorrow, okay? I want to see you again." Mark did come back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Within a week, he was visiting Pooky every night, always sitting at the same spot at the bar, always talking to her. She started calling him "my husband," a term of endearment that made Mark's heart skip a beat every time he heard it. She said he was different from other customers, that he was kind and respectful, that she felt comfortable with him. After 2 weeks, Pooky asked Mark if he wanted to take her out of the bar, not for the night, but permanently. She said she was tired of working there, that she wanted a normal life, that if he helped her, she would quit and be with him. Mark did not hesitate. He paid the bar a fee 10,000 baht, about $300, and Pooky left with him that night. She moved into his hotel room, and within days, Mark felt like he had found exactly what he had been searching for. Pooky was everything Mark had hoped for and more. She was affectionate, attentive, and seemingly devoted to making him happy. She cooked for him simple Thai dishes like fried rice, som tam, and grilled chicken, and she cleaned the hotel room, folded his clothes, and made sure he always had cold beer in the small refrigerator. She laughed at his jokes, held his hand when they walked through the streets, and called him husband in front of other people, which made Mark feel proud and validated. Within a month, Mark decided to rent a house. The hotel was getting expensive, and he wanted a place where he and Pooky could build a real life together. He found a small 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Pattaya. The rent was 15,000 baht per month, about $450, and the house was furnished with basic furniture and appliances. It was not much, but it felt like home. Pooky was thrilled. She decorated the house with flowers and small trinkets, cooked elaborate meals, and invited a few of her friends over for dinner to show off her new life. Mark felt like he was finally living the dream he had envisioned, a simple, comfortable life in Thailand with a woman who loved him. But Pooky also started talking more about their future. She said she wanted to be a real wife, not just a girlfriend. She said in Thai culture, if a woman lived with a man without being married, people would judge her, would think she was not respectable. She said she wanted to marry Mark, to have a proper life together, to be seen as a legitimate couple. Mark was hesitant at first. He had been married twice before, and both times had ended badly. But Pooky was different. She was not demanding or materialistic. She did not ask for expensive gifts or designer clothes. She just wanted security, stability, and the respect that came with marriage. Pooky also talked about money. She said it would be easier if they had a joint bank account, so they could manage their finances together. She said it was what Thai couples did, that it showed trust and commitment. Mark had around $260,000 in his American bank account, the money from selling his house and cashing in his pension. He was living off that money, spending around $2,000 a month on rent, food, and entertainment. At first, Mark was reluctant to open a joint account. He had been burned before, and he knew that mixing money with relationships could be dangerous. But Pooky seemed hurt by his hesitation. She said he did not trust her, that he still saw her as a bar girl rather than his partner. She said if they were going to build a life together, they needed to trust each other completely. Mark did not want to hurt her. He did not want her to feel like he was holding back, so he agreed. They went to a Bangkok bank branch in Pattaya, and Mark opened a joint account. He transferred his entire savings, $260,000, into the account. Pooky's name was on the account alongside his, and she had full access. Pooky hugged him tightly when they left the bank. She said he was the best man she had ever known, that she would never leave him, that they would grow old together. Mark believed her. He wanted to believe her. And for a while, everything seemed perfect. Call to action. If this story is making you uncomfortable because you recognize the warning signs, that's good. It means you're paying attention. Romance scammers rely on isolation, trust, and the universal desire for love. Subscribe to this channel and share this video to help protect others from making the same devastating mistakes. Mark's story is about to take a dark turn, and you need to see how quickly everything can unravel. In May of 2023, just 6 weeks after they met, Mark and Pooky got married. It was not a big ceremony, just a simple registration at the local AMFR office in Pattaya. Pooky wore a white dress she had bought at a market, and Mark wore a button-down shirt and slacks. They brought 2 of Pooky's friends to serve as witnesses, and the entire process took less than an hour. Afterward, they went to a small restaurant near the beach to celebrate. Pooky was radiant, smiling and laughing, taking selfies and posting them on her Facebook with captions like, "Finally married to my love," and "Best day of my life." Mark felt a swell of pride and happiness. He had done it. He had found love again. He had found a woman who wanted to be with him, who appreciated him, who made him feel like his life had meaning. But even then, there were small signs that something was not quite right. Mark's friends in the expat community, men he had met at bars and restaurants, older Westerners who had been living in Pattaya for years, warned him that marrying a bar girl was a mistake. They said these women were professionals, that they knew how to manipulate lonely men, that once the marriage papers were signed, things would change. One man, a 70-year-old Australian named Keith, pulled Mark aside one evening and said, "Mate, I know you think she's different. They all think that. But I've seen this happen 100 times. Bar girls don't change. They just get better at hiding who they really are. Protect your money. Don't put anything in her name. And for God's sake, don't open a joint account." Mark had already opened the joint account. He did not tell Keith that. He just smiled and said he appreciated the concern. But Pooky was different. Keith shook his head and said, "I hope you're right. But if you're not, don't say I didn't warn you." Mark pushed the warnings out of his mind. He told himself these men were bitter, jaded, that they had been hurt, and now assumed every relationship was doomed. But his relationship was different. Pooky loved him. She had proven it by marrying him, by cooking for him, by staying with him even when she could have easily gone back to the bar and found someone with more money. But things did start to change after the marriage. Pooky became more distant. She spent more time on her phone, always texting, always scrolling through Facebook. When Mark asked who she was talking to, she would say it was her friends, her family, nothing important. She stopped cooking as often, stopped being as affectionate, stopped calling him husband with the same warmth and enthusiasm. Mark told himself it was normal. They had been living together for 2 months, and the initial excitement was fading. Marriage was about more than just romance. It was about partnership, about building a life together, about working through the difficult moments as well as the easy ones. Pooky also started asking about money more frequently. She wanted to know how much Mark had in the account, how much he was spending, how long the money would last. She said she was worried about their future, that they needed to be careful, that they should think about investing in something that would generate income. She suggested buying a small business, maybe a bar, maybe a restaurant, maybe a shop. She said it would give them financial security, that it would ensure they always had money coming in. Mark was hesitant. He had worked hard for that money, and he wanted it to last. He was living comfortably on around $2,000 a month, and at that rate, his savings would last for over 10 years. He did not see the need to rush into any investments, but Pooky was persistent. She said he was being too cautious, that he was wasting an opportunity, that they could build something great together if he would just trust her. Mark said he needed time to think about it. Pooky seemed frustrated, but she did not push further. For a few weeks, things seemed to settle. Pooky was still distant, still spending a lot of time on her phone, but she was there. She was still his wife. She was still sleeping in his bed, still living in his house, still part of his life. And then, one Tuesday morning in late June, Mark woke up and everything was gone. Mark woke up around 7 in the morning. The house was quiet, too quiet. He rolled over, expecting to see Pooky lying next to him, but the bed was empty. He called her name. No answer. He got up, walked through the small house, and immediately noticed that something was wrong. Pooky's clothes were gone. Her shoes were gone. Her makeup, her hairbrush, her phone charger, all gone. The kitchen was empty. The small decorations she had put up around the house were gone. Even the cheap plastic flowers she had bought at the market were missing. Mark felt his heart start to race. He checked his phone. There was one message from Pooky, sent at 4 in the morning. It read, "Sorry." That was it. No explanation. No goodbye. Just sorry. Mark tried calling her. The phone rang twice, then went to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. He sent her a message online, the messaging app they used. The message showed as unread. He checked her Facebook page. It was gone. Mark stood in the empty house, his hands shaking, trying to understand what was happening. He opened his banking app, his fingers clumsy and unsteady. He logged into the joint account they had opened just a few weeks earlier. The balance showed $12. Mark stared at the screen, unable to process what he was seeing. He refreshed the app. The number did not change. $12 out of $260,000. He scrolled through the transaction history. There had been a series of withdrawals over the past 3 days, large transfers to Thai bank accounts he did not recognize, cash withdrawals from ATMs, payments to mobile banking services, all of it authorized by Pooky. All of it legal, because her name was on the account. Mark collapsed onto the floor, his back against the wall, staring at his phone. $260,000. Gone. Everything he had worked for, everything he had saved, everything he had planned to live on for the rest of his life. Gone. He sat there for over an hour, unable to move, unable to think. Finally, he forced himself to stand. He grabbed his phone and went to the Pattaya police station. The officer at the police station looked bored as Mark explained what had happened. He showed the officer his phone, the bank statements, the marriage certificate, the screenshots of his conversations with Pooky. The officer barely glanced at them. "This is civil matter," the officer said in broken English. "She, your wife, you give her access to account. She take money. This not crime. But she stole everything," Mark said, his voice rising. "She emptied the account and disappeared. How is that not a crime?" The officer shrugged. "Joint account mean both people can use money. She use money. This legal. You want divorce? You go lawyer. But police cannot help. So she just gets away with it? You marry bar girl," the officer said flatly. "You no risk. Many Farang have same problem. This your mistake." Mark left the police station feeling numb. He went to a lawyer's office, a small practice near Walking Street that advertised services in English. The lawyer, a middle-aged Thai man in a wrinkled suit, listened to Mark's story and shook his head. "I am sorry, but there is very little we can do. She was a joint account holder, so the withdrawals were legal. You would need to prove that she defrauded you, which is very difficult. You would need evidence that she never intended to stay in the marriage, that her sole purpose was to steal your money, but proving intent is almost impossible." "What about the marriage?" Mark asked. "Can I get it annulled?" "You can file for divorce, but it will take time and money. And even if the divorce is granted, you will not get your money back. It is gone." Mark sat in silence for a long moment. Then he asked, "How much would it cost to file for divorce?" "Around 50,000 baht, maybe more." Mark laughed bitterly. 50,000 baht. He did not even have that much left. He left the lawyer's office and wandered through the streets of Pattaya in a daze. He had no money, no home. The rent was due in 2 weeks, and he could not pay it. No way to contact Pooky. No way to get his money back. He was 61 years old, stranded in a foreign country, with $12 to his name. Mark spent the next few days trying to figure out what to do. He called Emily, his daughter, and told her what had happened. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Dad," she finally said, her voice tight, "I told you not to rush into anything. I told you to be careful." "I know," Mark said, his voice breaking. "I know you did. I thought she was different." "What are you going to do?" "I do not know. I do not have any money. I cannot afford a flight home. I cannot even afford rent." Emily sighed. "I can send you some money for a flight, but that's all I can do. We have our own bills, our own problems. I cannot support you." "I am not asking you to support me," Mark said. I do not know what to do." Emily sent him $1,500, enough for a flight home and a little extra, but Mark did not use it for a flight. He could not bring himself to leave. Going back to California meant admitting complete defeat, meant returning to a place where he had no home, no job, no savings, no future. At least in Thailand, the cost of living was low. At least here, he could survive on very little. Mark moved out of the house and into a cheap hostel in Pattaya. He rented a bed in a shared dormitory room for 3,000 baht a month, about $90. The room had 8 bunk beds, shared bathrooms, and no privacy. His roommates were a mix of young backpackers and older expats who, like him, had run out of money and options. Mark started looking for work. It was illegal for foreigners to work in Thailand without a work permit, but there were always under-the-table jobs available: handyman work, helping expats move, doing small repairs for guest houses and hotels. Mark was good with his hands, and word spread quickly that there was an American guy who could fix things cheaply. He started getting calls, small jobs that paid a few hundred baht here and there. He was surviving, but barely. He ate street food, avoided spending money on anything unnecessary, and lived day to day, never knowing if he would have enough to get by. Over the next few months, Mark learned more about what had happened to him. He started talking to other expats in Pattaya, men who had similar stories, men who had lost everything to women they thought loved them. He learned that Pooky, or Suiman, her real name, had done this before. She had married at least 3 other foreign men over the past 5 years, each time draining their bank accounts and disappearing. One man, a German named Klaus, told Mark that Pooky was part of a loose network of bar girls who shared information, strategies, and even fake documents. They knew exactly how to target vulnerable men, how to build trust, how to isolate them from friends and family, and how to extract as much money as possible before vanishing. Klaus had lost 40,000 euros to Pooky 3 years earlier. He said he had tried to find her, tried to press charges, but she had changed her phone number, moved to a different city, and reinvented herself with a new identity. He said the police did not care, the lawyers could not help, and there was no system in place to protect foreign men from this kind of scam. Mark felt a deep, burning shame. He had been so naive, so desperate for love and connection, that he had ignored every warning sign. He had opened a joint account with a woman he had known for 6 weeks. He had married a bar girl despite everyone telling him not to. He had handed over his entire life savings to someone he barely knew, and now he was paying the price. Mark is now 61 years old, living in a shared hostel dormitory in Pattaya, surviving on odd handyman jobs that pay just enough to cover his rent and food. He has no savings, no pension. He cashed it all in and gave it to Pooky. He has no home to return to in California. He has burned bridges with his daughter, who is frustrated and exhausted by his poor decisions. He spends his days walking through Pattaya, past the bars where he first met Pooky, past the house where they lived together, past the bank where he made the biggest mistake of his life. He sees other older Western men with young Thai women, and he wonders how many of them are repeating his mistake, how many of them will end up like him, broke, alone, and stranded. Mark thinks about Pooky often. He wonders where she is, what she is doing, if she ever thinks about him. He wants to believe that some part of what they had was real, but he knows it was not. She was working. He was the job. And she did her job very well. Mark has started volunteering with an expat support group in Pattaya, sharing his story with newcomers, warning them about the dangers of moving too fast, trusting too easily, and ignoring the advice of people who have been through it before. He stands in front of small groups of older men, many of whom are in the early stages of relationships with Thai women, and he tells them exactly what happened to him. Some listen, most do not. They think they are different, that their situation is unique, that their girlfriend or wife is not like the others. Mark understands. He thought the same thing. He has accepted that he will never get his money back. He has accepted that he will probably spend the rest of his life in Thailand, living in cheap hostels, doing odd jobs, surviving on the margins. He has accepted that he destroyed his own life through a combination of loneliness, desperation, and willful ignorance. Mark Reynolds is 61 years old, and he lost $260,000, his entire life savings, to a woman he married after knowing her for 6 weeks. He ignored every warning. He dismissed every red flag. He believed that love could be simple, that a bar girl could transform into a devoted wife, that trust and commitment could be built in a matter of weeks. He was wrong. Pooky never loved him. She saw an opportunity, a lonely, desperate man with money, and no one to protect him, and she took it. She was patient, affectionate, and utterly convincing. She played the role of the devoted girlfriend, the grateful wife, the woman who just wanted security and respect. And when she had everything she needed, legal access to his bank account through their marriage and joint account, she emptied it and disappeared. Mark sits in his shared dormitory room now, listening to the sounds of backpackers laughing and talking, and he thinks about the choices he made. He thinks about the moment he opened that joint account, the moment he signed the marriage papers, the moment he ignored Keith's warning at the bar. He thinks about how easily a lifetime of hard work can be erased by a few bad decisions made in the grip of loneliness and hope. He did not marry a woman. He married a warning he refused to hear, and now he is living with the consequences, broke, stranded, and broken, in a city that once promised him paradise but delivered only pain. Mark's story is not unique. There are hundreds, maybe thousands, of men like him in Thailand, men who came seeking love and found only exploitation, men who ignored the warnings because they so desperately wanted to believe that someone could want them for who they were rather than what they had. The bar girls of Pattaya are not monsters. They are professionals operating in an environment where Western men are seen as walking ATMs, where loneliness is a commodity to be exploited, and where the legal system offers no protection to those who make foolish choices in the name of love. Mark knows he has no one to blame but himself. He made the decisions. He ignored the warnings. He opened the account, signed the papers, and handed over his life savings to a woman he barely knew. And now he is paying the price. He will spend the rest of his life in Thailand, not because he wants to, but because he cannot afford to leave. He will continue doing odd jobs, living in shared rooms, surviving on the margins of expat society. He will watch other men make the same mistakes he made, and he will try to warn them, knowing that most will not listen. This is his life now. This is his future. And every day, he wakes up in his shared dormitory room, looks at his phone, and sees the same banking app showing the same balance, $12. Mark's story is a devastating reminder that romance scams are not always elaborate schemes conducted from overseas. Sometimes, the scammer is sitting across from you at dinner, sleeping in your bed, and calling you husband. If this documentary has opened your eyes to the very real dangers of moving too fast in relationships, especially in environments where transactional relationships are normalized, please subscribe and share this video. Awareness is the only defense we have. Stay vigilant, protect your assets, and remember, real love is patient, transparent, and never requires you to ignore every warning sign in the name of trust. Thank you for watching, and please, stay safe.